Oh yeah, we are back. We are back. We are back. I'm coming off a flight from Las Vegas, so the energy is about to be off the charts. But you know what's going to be even more off the charts is this conversation with Tamra Ryan, best-selling author of the book Follow Ship in the House. Tamra, welcome to the show.
Hey Jake, how are you?
I'm excellent. I'm excellent. How are you doing? How does it feel? Your book's out. How are you feeling?
When your book comes out, it's a mixture. It's a certain amount of excitement because it's done. I've said before the best thing about writing a book is when it's done, and then at the same time that's when it gets scary, right? It's out of your hands and it's out in the world and it's there for people to respond to.
Yeah. And that's a beautiful thing. And we're going to dig into that and the emotions of the release here in a little bit. But I want to kind of get everyone to paint a picture about you and what kind of made you want to write this particular book. What's the background, the idea, and why'd you decide to create this particular book?
Well, I'm not really in general a person like this, but this was a middle of the night wake up, and I had the idea, and the word fellowship at the same time, and it happened on after I had had a surprise party thrown for me to celebrate my 15th anniversary of being the CEO of Women's Bean Project, which is an employment social enterprise based in Denver. And I was very humbled by that, and went to sleep kind of thinking about, like, why do people care that I'm still the leader of Women's Beam Project? And what came out of that was this idea of fellowship, which is, in my view, is sort of changing leadership around and viewing it from the perspective of why people want to follow a leader. And so what I know from having now written two books is it's one thing to have the idea, it's another thing to flesh it out and actually make it into a book. And so from that original idea, there, you know, there was a lot of thinking and soul searching and really trying to understand what I meant by that. And then the pandemic happened kind of in between. And like many leaders, I had sort of this existential crisis of what does it mean to lead today, especially in an environment where we collectively really don't trust leaders.
Mm,
And so,
mm.
and then ultimately, that is really the what I honed in on as the key to fellowship, which is we are in a very low trust environment, and how do we, as leaders, build trust and inspire people to want to follow us?
Okay, this is great. Easy segue to obviously the next question, which I have to ask is why are we in this low trust environment and what can we do about it as leaders?
Well, I think we can all look around, and even if we are leaders, we can look around and see leaders we don't trust. And there is lots of research that shows that the lack of trust in leadership around the world. We don't trust our politicians. We don't trust the church because of scandals that have happened, and we don't trust. Uh, for the most part, other people who have been put in positions of leadership. I think one of the things that we have a tendency to do, and I talk about this in fellowship, is we tend to put leaders up on a pedestal.
Mhm.
And then we sort of resent them for being on that pedestal, especially when they begin to act like they belong there. And the problem with a pedestal is you have nowhere to go but down. And so I think that we are at a place where people really want to trust, and there are behaviors that we can display as leaders to inspire trust in people.
Mm.
At, but it's not going to happen automatically because we are at this I think this really low point in terms of trust overall.
And so your book is the 16 lessons, right, to make a leader worth following, and this concept, and I really love how you kind of flip it around, right? Because we often come from the lens of what everyone else sees, the pedestal, the this is what makes a leader, this is who a leader is, and there's always different interpretations of that. And you kind of flipped it around. So what are some of the lessons that you share in the book that can give people a glimpse into becoming a leader worth following?
Well, one of the lessons is, and it's related to the pedestal idea, is it's not about you as the leader. And the reason I brought that up in particular is because in my role, I'm the CEO of a nonprofit social enterprise. And people make a decision about whether or not to support our organization based on meeting me. and so in many instances, it is about their trust in me and their belief in what I say. But the moment I really am clear, the moment I begin to think it's about me, we're all in trouble, because it's really about me being the face of the organization and enlisting people to come with me on this journey that this organization is on. But I think too often, and I give lots of examples in my book of leaders who have either done particular lessons well or have not done them well. And in this regard, one of the things I talk about is Dennis Kozlowski, who was the CEO of Tyco, and how he became, in my view, began to think it was about him, and he used the resources of the company for his own personal gain.
Mm.
And so I think that there are a lot, we see lots of examples around us when leaders begin to think it's about them, or in the tech world where they have a leader has some success and we begin to think they're brilliant. Uh, and I think that we have to recognize the leader's job is to be leading and bringing people along with them. It is not all about them.
I it's really really interesting, and the last thing that you said related to the tech example, that's a very fascinating thing about sometimes, like, oh, you're seeing them, oh, so we must assume they're successful, we must assume it, and then it becomes about them. When you think of great leaders, are there specific qualities that you look for when you're looking to partner with someone, or when you're looking to team up with someone, or whenever you're just looking to level up your game, right? Because we can always learn from other people. So what are the things that really stand out to you in what makes a great leader?
Well, I've identified four categories. The first is vision. It is the leader's responsibility to create a vision and then enlist people to join him or them on that journey to this accomplishment that is realizing that vision. The second is integrity. Being able to trust the leader to say what they mean and mean what they say, as one example. The third is courage, and courage can look like a lot of different things in a business environment. Um, and the fourth is emotional intelligence. And so I think those are really the essence and of what makes somebody worthy of being followed. And those are the things I look for in other leaders. And what I recognize is none of us are great at all of the 16 things. And what I tried to point out in the book was examples of leaders who perhaps did at least one of the things really well, but it's not meant to imply that they did everything great. I think in general, leadership is a journey. It's not a destination. And I think if we view our careers and our lives and our personal development as a journey, then that leaves us open to be continuously developing.
Yeah, that's so good. Do you think that leadership is a position, or do you believe that anybody can be a leader regardless of their position?
So what I would say is it's a mindset. So it's a mindset versus a position. And one of the things I talk about in the book is how many people who are in a leadership position have a challenge with making the transition from managing to leading. I would say managing is something you do, and a leader is someone you are. And so,
Mm.
regardless of the position, you don't necessarily need to be in an official leadership role to have a leadership mindset. In the same way that you might be in a leadership role and not have a leadership mindset, but really have a manager mindset. And I actually see this a lot, for instance, in people who are founders of their own companies, and maybe they're smaller companies, and they're very much oriented around the doing the work and having everybody else be doing the work. And they're not thinking a lot about how am I leading this group to accomplish these big goals. It becomes very much about sort of the production and people butts in seats. Is everybody doing the work on a daily basis? And can I see that? And I think a lot of times for these leaders of companies, they're missing the fact that they're not really leading. They're just high level managers.
That right there is a very fascinating distinction. And I wrote down the notes here is that you said managing is something you do, leadership is something you are. And that's a great line. I don't know if you talk about that, or you've coined that one, but say that more. Okay. That's good. So I want to talk a little bit more about your book Adventure, right? You have this middle of the night thought, the title comes to mind, and then you decide it's time to do this thing, right? What was the process like for you? You know, this was your second book. So what was different about it this time? Where did you feel that you had just a great experience?
I will say that this book, I knew how to write a book. I think, if someone had asked me before I wrote any books, how do you write a book? I would have just said, well, you just start at the beginning and you write till the end. And it's so not like that. It's much more organic. And what I would say is really you have to, at least what I've learned is you really have to get very clear on what it is you're trying to get across. And I know that sort of sounds simple, but it's actually not that simple. And so, having written the first book, I knew that I really needed to. So, what do I mean by fellowship? Is sort of the first question I asked, and it was a lot of just looking at examples and thinking through what I thought the most important aspects were. So then, you get sort of to the point where you got the concept, and that's really, it's absolutely necessary, but it's in a lot of ways such a small part of the whole thing.
Yeah.
And then it is, okay, what's the structure of the book going to be, and how am I going to go about writing it? And you do a whole bunch of work before you're actually really writing the book. And I think that that's something that many people don't realize as well, how much work goes into the pre-writing, which includes, the research and the outlining, and the flow of the book, and what's going to be, in each chapter, and what are the important points, and what are the points. When I was writing my first book, I took a bunch of writing classes because I really wanted to work on the craft of writing. I have 2 science degrees, and I often say that they beat all the good writing out of me. So I really needed to work on the craft. One of the things that kept coming up in the classes was the idea of killing your darlings. And I think we've all been victim to this. We write something that we think is absolutely brilliant, but it's really only brilliant to us. And that if it were really out in the world, it would not be so great. And
Mm,
so you have to be willing to, kill those things that in the moment you think are brilliant, and really stick to what is essential to what you're trying to accomplish in your book. So, having a good concept, doing the research, then doing a strong outline of what will go into which chapter. All those things have to be done before you actually really are writing. And
100%.
and and then the writing's almost incidental to it, which I think is really funny, because that's not at all what you think going into writing a book.
Totally. And I tell people all the time, because I mean, I hear people why they don't write their books all day long, right? And one of the big things they start writing, and then they have a different idea, so then they start writing about this, or they try to make the writing that they had perfect, and then they revise it over and over again, and they can never make progress, or they write only when they're inspired, and it's like, no. That's going to slow you down. The first step to writing a book is not writing a book, right?
Yeah.
It's all of the things, and it's counterintuitive when you haven't done it, or when you aren't working with a company like ours or someone else out there to really help you flush out your concepts. And so I always we have a thing where we call these people the hopeful Harrys, because they're hopeful that it'll eventually come out of them, or they're hopeful that when they start writing, it will just automatically finish your first book. But in reality, right, if we look at every other aspect of our life, we don't expect perfection on try one. We don't expect to be great at something we've never done, right? Would you ever take a test that you didn't study for? No, unless you already knew the material. But then again, you had pre-work. Would you ever show up for something without preparing? No, you prepare before, right? And so oftentimes people think writing is the first part. But in reality, writing is the byproduct of the preparation that comes from the experience leading up to that. And so I love how you have learned that and kind of framed that, because that enabled you to get through this experience pretty quickly. And so what I'd love to kind of hear for you is, were there any moments in this second book, Tamra, were there any moments in this second book that you found being like huge standout moments, huge accomplishments, or huge like turning points to keep you going through the experience?
Well, I will say that the biggest thing for me to avoid the constant editing of yourself, which is you're exactly right. It's a huge trap for most writers is to self edit over and over again. Um, Working with you all was great because the process was that I did the outline and then I wrote what's called the shitty first draft. And I sent it to my editor, and she made comments. She pointed out things that didn't flow. She pointed out things that in some instances I'd repeated and didn't realize it, and then sent it back to me for edits. And then I did that process again with her. And so that's all before you're getting into like the sort of the legit editing of the copy editing, and so it was much more concept editing process, and I find that that is really the thing that sort of gets you over the hump, because ultimately somebody can help you edit the grammar and move paragraphs around or recommendations for that, but you really need somebody at the very beginning who helps you with the concept flow. Like I could ask questions like, is my idea sticking together? Because it's at that moment, it's the first time it's really out of your head and on paper, so to speak. And so nobody has reacted to it yet at that point. And so that I think is a really important first stage of the writing process, to have someone who is really being much more the concept editor and is forcing you to uh, make sure that it's well, I guess I think it's one thing when it's still all in your head. It's an entirely different thing when it's out of your head.
100, 100%. There is, and I think of this in just all areas of life, like singing, for example. I'm thinking in my head, I can carry this tune. I'm like, oh, I got the melody. I'm feeling good. The minute I open my voice to actually sing along, I'm like, wait a second. How did it go from picture perfect in my head to this? And that's the same thing with the book. In our mind, oh, it's all flushed out. I've already written it in my mind. But then you put it on a paper and you're like, wait a second, wait a second. What's happening here? Right? And then you work and you refine it. And I think it's a beautiful process because who you become in the pursuit of writing a book always evolves, it always grows. The feeling of the emotion, like when you said to start this episode, is once you release it, you accomplish it, but now you're open to the rest of the world actually seeing it, right? So talk to me a little bit about that, Tamara. Like, what was it like for you to release this book? How did you celebrate your launch? Tell us like what you did to really kick off this book's birth to the world.
Well, I did a whole bunch of things in lead up to it because I really wanted to get my networks, my groups of friends and my social networks, and then also my professional networks, because this is a business book ultimately, to be watching out for it and to know it was coming. And so I think that it's a big mistake if on the day it launches, you're like, oh, surprise, here's this book.
Yeah,
I've been actually talking about it for many months, and it started really with, including it in my bio a couple years ago, where she's working on her next book, Followership. And some of that is a public accountability, right? I can't take it out of my bio now that it's in.
right.
And so there's a buildup, and you all helped me with that and helped me with a lot of both images and suggestions for creative and all that kind of thing for postings. I did a 7-day countdown before the launch. And first, I will say it was good for me to have some accountability uh, with my success coach, because self promotion is not my thing. And being in the nonprofit world in particular, that is not something you do. And so having somebody who was sort of checking up on me and had sort of made it easy to do this 7-day countdown, and for me to then be able to say on the day of the book launched, and then buy it today, and my goal is to become a #1 bestseller, and all of those things were things I probably wouldn't have done as well on my own if left to my own devices, but I was almost able to other it and do it. And as a result, I did make it into a couple different categories as number one bestseller. And in fact, today is 1 week post launch, and it's still a number one bestseller in business leadership training. So that's a terrific accomplishment. And some of it was I needed to trust the process, but I also needed to uh, get outside of my comfort zone, which frankly is what writing a book really is.
Yeah. Wow. That's so, I mean, it's amazing because, you did all the work. And then, for a lot of people, the promotion comes easy. And for a lot of people, the promotion doesn't come easy. And so I want to just congratulate you and celebrate you because you recognize something that you knew was probably going to put you out of the comfort zone, but you trusted the process and you did it anyway, and it worked. And I really love what you did about preceding your audience. All right, this is something that I believe in so much is you got to talk about the book before the book's here. Because otherwise, like, whoa, I didn't even know you were writing a book. And then the intent goes instead of from buying the book to, oh my gosh, you wrote a book. And so because you primed the audience and you got them ready, you were able to generate great results, bestseller, multiple categories. And I want to hear, the book's been out at the time of this recording for a week. What's been the initial feedback? What's been some of the conversations you're having? What are some of the outcomes that are starting to come to fruition from this book so far?
Well, I've gotten a bunch of reviews on Amazon, which is fun, and people have what's interesting is uh, the reviews started even before people actually yet had the book in hand, because what the reviews were about my leadership, and so they were actually reviews about my personal brand, which uh, I'm thrilled with, but I didn't actually entirely expect. And so that's where making people aware ahead of time so that they were poised to write reviews um, at the very beginning was really important, I think. But what's been fun is now people I know, as their books arrive, a lot of people bought ebooks, but then also bought the print book. And as their books arrive, they're sending me pictures of themselves holding the book. That's happened a bunch of times because they're excited and they want me to know that it came. I have a friend one of my very close friends finished the book over the weekend and texted me and said it was excellent. And a couple of the stories within the book really resonated with her because they were examples of leaders of companies she actually had worked for throughout her career, which I didn't even think about when I was using them as examples. And so the feedback so far has been great, and people have been super supportive. And, that on some level is also kind of a relief, just like to get again over that hump where you're getting feedback. I always felt like, especially with the first book, and the reason I worked on the craft of writing is the last thing I wanted was for somebody to get my book and read it and be embarrassed for me, which I 100% realize is my own baggage. But that I do think it's those kinds of things that keep a lot of people from actually writing a book, is that they can't get over that hump of what will people think when they actually read it. So you go to all the trouble to write a book and then nobody reads it. What's the point of that?
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. So now the book's out. You're doing it.
Mhm.
You're getting people sending you pictures. They're hyped. You're hyped. Everything's going great. How do you now want to leverage this book? It's still so fresh. We're still celebration mode. But now you have this book. You have the greatest potential asset to your business, to your life that you could ever imagine because it's a direct correlation to your belief system and how you believe leadership operates. So, what do you want to do with it next? How do we plan on using it? And let's dig into that, and then talk a little bit more about leadership to wrap it up.
Well, I intentionally wrote the book to be a platform for keynote speaking. And so uh, as a part of my job, I've been doing lots of speaking for a long time. And so that's not such a foreign idea to me, but I am transitioning out of my role as leader of the Women's Beam Project in 2025. And so I will really be launching a new career of writing and keynote speaking. And then also executive coaching. I think there's an opportunity for new leaders who are making that transition from
Mm,
managing to leading. And so I am also launching that sort of next chapter. So that's really what it is intended to be, is sort of this calling card, I think, in a lot of ways, for what I do next. And I appreciate really the timing of launching the book now so that I can off ramp in from my current role to on ramping into what comes next.
amazing, amazing. And one of the things that I'll share with you from my experience and a lot of other people that we have worked books, and I think it'll be helpful for everyone listening too, is if you want to speak from your book, one of my favorite things to do in the world, you own your book. You own 100% of the rights. That's how we build out this business so that you can use it however you want. What I'd encourage you to do is look at 100 people or 100 companies or 100 leaders and send them a copy of your book and just start to facilitate. When I started speaking, that was how I started booking my gigs. Is I just sent out copies to everybody. It's $3 to send them. Like it's very, very affordable to utilize this. And so I would just send books all day long. And then I would use the book as the gateway to an introduction. And then from there I would have a way in, because there's a thing called the law of reciprocity. And the law of reciprocity, I'm sure you're familiar with this, but basically it states that if someone does something for you, you're likely going to want to do something back for them. Doesn't mean it has to be in equal amounts and doesn't have to be on a specific timeline. But if someone gives me a book, I'm logically going to want to thank them for that book, right? So how am I going to do that? Well, I'm going to reach out and communicate. Well, by doing this, you've now opened the door, and then it's up to you, once the door is open, to now navigate that. I've used this technique to generate $5, $10, $15,000 of speaking fees and contract values just based off of giving the $5 book, the $3 book over and over and over again to the right people. And so I think with what your book's about, with the existing network, giving it to the right people, doing bulk orders, getting speaking engagements, this is going to be such a fun adventure for you. And oh gosh, am I excited for your book to be in the hands of so many people, because I think you have such a great perspective on what it means to be a leader. And you could tell that you believe in this, because you're not it's all about me and my book. You're literally wrote a book about, it's not about you, right? It's about making yourself a leader worth following. And so I love that. So I'm excited for you, Tamra. I'm very, very excited for you to continue on. And as we get close here to the end, I want to go back to leadership. When you look at some of the leaders that you mentioned in your book, okay, and you talk about them, and you mentioned you have a variety of different examples. Is there one leader for you that has had a significant role in your life, whether it be someone you featured in this book, whether it be somebody that you've talked about? Is there a leader in your life that has helped shape your belief system around this?
So the person who comes to mind, and she actually is in the book, is Michelle Obama, and it's because in the book I use her as an example of someone who takes the high road, and I talk about her speech, when they go low, we go high,
Mm,
and it's I don't know that she necessarily shaped my beliefs as much as reinforced. And
right.
sometimes I drive my husband crazy when I take the high road, but I am such a firm believer in always taking the high road, because I will never regret that. And I say in the book, like, that I don't need to point out when somebody's being a jerk. There's a point at which that's going to become apparent to everyone. It's not on me to show that. And I think we will never regret taking the high road. And I think she's a phenomenal example of that. And so that is sort of both relates to my leadership style for sure, but also just my personal ethos around how to behave.
Mm. Thank you for sharing. I'm glad I asked that question, because I really enjoyed you sharing that answer. So, how do we get this book? How do we support you? How do we bring you to speak? How do we potentially work with you when you start doing that and accepting clients? Like, how do we connect with you following this, Tamra?
Well, I'm doing all of those things right now. So you can find the book on Amazon. Just look for Fellowship by Tamra Ryan. And it's super easy to find. And obviously, because it made #1 bestseller, so other people are finding it. You can find me on tamraryan.com is my URL. And so that's a way to connect very easily with me by just clicking the contact me link. I can be found on LinkedIn. Tamra Ryan. So I have a pretty easy name, so it's should be pretty easy to find me.
I love it. I love it. Guys, Tamra Ryan. Tamra Ryan. Ryan. There we go. That's the name of the game. That's the name of Tamra Ryan. So Tamra, thank you for being on the show. It's been a pleasure. I think your book is going to impact a lot of lives. I think you're literally at the very beginning. You know, the book's a week old. There's so much life for this book. There's so much need for this book. And it's been a privilege to have our team be able to support you on this adventure. So thank you for being on the show and enlightening us with your wisdom.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate it, and I think when I imagined this day, it didn't seem as fun as it actually has been.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, guys, there you have it. Tamra Ryan in the house, the best-selling author of the book Followship, 16 Lessons to Become a Leader Worth Following. Make sure to go check it out and check Tamra out. You'll see everything down below. And here's my challenge as we wrap this up. My challenge is this. The line that's sticking with me from this episode already is managing is what you do. Leadership is who you are. I want you to evaluate yourself. Kind of think about it. Do you resemble the person of a leader? Do you have what it takes? Or are you just doing the things you think you're supposed to be doing? Dig into that. And if you don't know the answer to that, read Fellowship. You're probably going to help learn a little bit more about that. But I want you to do a minute of self-reflection. I know I sure will be doing after this. So that's the episode today. That's what we got. The guest is Tamra Ryan. Make sure to grab a copy of the book, and we will see you on the next one.